The sun rose reluctantly over Belgium, casting a dull amber light across the misted fields near Lommel. Dew clung to the hedgerows and glistened on the hulls of Shermans parked like beasts of war, quiet but coiled. At the edge of the road stood Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, his boots planted firm in the churned-up soil, eyes fixed north across the canal. It was September 17, 1944. The opening day of Operation Market Garden. Joe's Bridge lay just ahead, an iron structure spanning the Meuse-Escaut Canal. Not a grand bridge, not a wide one, but it had become the key to the entire operation. Seized days earlier by the Irish Guards, it now served as the launch point for one of the most audacious plans of the war. The men called it Joe's Bridge, not after a fallen comrade as some assumed, but after Brigadier Joe Vandeleur, the bold Irish Guards commander who had led the charge to capture it. Horrocks had studied the road north for days, one narrow strip of tarmac stretching deep into enemy territory, through Valkenswaard, Eindhoven, Nijmegen, and finally Arnhem. It would carry thousands of men, hundreds of tanks, artillery, fuel trucks, and supply lorries. If it held, they would be across the Rhine by week's end. If it didn't, the whole operation could collapse in days. He lit a cigarette with a match that barely held against the breeze. Around him, officers moved briskly, checking final orders, radioing units, glancing often at their watches. The calm before it all began. Brigadier Vandeleur arrived in his scout car, goggles up on his forehead, hair already wind-tossed. He saluted with a smile. "Morning, sir. Lovely weather for a liberation." Horrocks returned the salute. "Let's hope the enemy agrees." They walked a few paces along the canal bank. Vandeleur pointed toward the line of Irish Guards tanks, engines idling, crews sitting ready. The names were scrawled in white chalk on the hulls: Caliban, Crusader, Cromwell's Wrath. Young men leaned out of turret hatches, some drinking tea, some writing quick letters on their knees. Every one of them knew they were the tip of the spear. At precisely 14:35, the first of the artillery thundered out from behind the line. A ripple, then a roar. British guns, nearly 1,000 of them, opened fire in coordinated sequence, rolling a curtain of steel ahead of the advancing tanks. The ground trembled. Leaves shook loose from nearby trees. Somewhere in the sky, American paratroopers were already dropping into Holland. Horrocks stood silently as the barrage intensified. He had seen many battles, from North Africa to Normandy, but never had so much depended on one stretch of road. Vandeleur climbed into his vehicle and adjusted his headset. "We'll move the moment the barrage lifts." Horrocks nodded. "Make it fast, Joe. Every minute counts." As the first tanks clanked forward and rolled across Joe's Bridge, Horrocks mounted a nearby platform to address the men gathered below. No theatrics, just the truth. "Gentlemen," he called out over the rumble, "this is a story you'll tell your grandchildren, and mightily bored they'll be." Laughter rippled through the ranks. It was the right tone, calm, confident, British to the bone. They didn't need speeches, they needed belief. Horrocks stepped down and lit another cigarette, watching as the lead units disappeared into the trees. Joe's Bridge was behind them now. The narrow road into Holland waited ahead, unseen, uncertain, and filled with enemy guns. He turned to his aide and said quietly, "Now it begins." By late afternoon, the road north had become a steel river. Sherman tanks, half-tracks, scout cars, fuel lorries, and ambulances, all straining forward in staggered columns. The line stretched for miles. Dust clung to every surface. The smell of exhaust fumes hung in the air like fog. Horrocks sat in his command vehicle, eyes scanning the map laid out across his lap. Valkenswaard lay just 10 miles ahead, a small Dutch town nestled along the main road. It was the first real objective. If they took it before nightfall, the timing might still hold. But timing was already beginning to slip. Reports crackled through the wireless, resistance ahead, mines on the roadside, sniper fire from the woods, nothing heavy yet, but enough to slow the column. Then it came. Just south of Valkenswaard, near a stretch of forest where the trees grew close to the road, German anti-tank guns opened fire. The first shell hit a Sherman dead on, no warning, no time to maneuver. The tank lurched sideways, black smoke rising from its turret. A second hit another farther down the line, setting off the fuel reserves inside. The sound was sharp, final. From his position half a mile behind, Horrocks watched the smoke rise. Vandeleur's voice came through the radio, clear and controlled. "Enemy anti-tank position left of the road, engaging." "We've taken some losses, sir." Horrocks tapped the map with a pencil. He'd expected resistance. Montgomery's entire plan had assumed speed would outpace German recovery. But this was too early, too direct. The road was too narrow to flank. Everything had to go straight up the gut. He stepped down from the vehicle and walked up to the nearest stalled tank. Its crew was already out, crouching in the ditch, waiting for the engineers to clear the way forward. One corporal looked no older than 19. His face was streaked with sweat and oil. "They're dug in, sir," the boy said. "We're trying to pull the knocked ones back." Horrocks nodded. "You'll get them. We always do." By the time Valkenswaard came into view, the column had lost several tanks. One burned quietly by the roadside, its hatches open, the inside scorched black. The crew had been pulled out, what was left of them. Later that evening, as the road was being cleared and units began to form a perimeter around the town, a chaplain approached Horrocks near his command lorry. "Sir," the chaplain said, removing his helmet. "There were 4 we couldn't identify. Tank crews, 2 vehicles, the heat. It made it impossible." Horrocks looked away for a moment, then back. "They've been buried just behind the church, marked as unknown." Horrocks thanked him, then walked alone toward the cemetery. It was small, quiet, hemmed in by trees. The fresh earth stood out among the older stones. 4 wooden crosses, no names. Dutch civilians had already placed small flowers beside each grave. He stood there a long while, hands behind his back, boots in the soft grass. They had made it through the first day, but just barely. Valkenswaard was taken, but the cost had arrived early. Too early. Back at headquarters, he sent the day's report to Montgomery. Valkenswaard secured. Enemy resistance heavier than expected. Several tanks lost. Route forward under assessment. Morale steady. Advance to continue at first light. He didn't mention the graves. There would be more. As the night settled over the Dutch countryside, the road behind was filled with wreckage. The road ahead was still unknown. A necessary halt. Darkness fell over Valkenswaard like a curtain drawn too soon. The rumble of tank engines faded to a low idle as crews set to work, refueling, repairing tracks, loading shells. Mechanics crawled beneath hulls with torches. Men brewed tea on cookers balanced atop ammo crates. The air was thick with the scent of oil, sweat, and burning wood from distant farmhouses. Horrocks stood in a makeshift command post, an old Dutch farmhouse commandeered for the night. The radio sets buzzed quietly. A kerosene lantern swung from a timber beam overhead, casting shadows on the map spread across the table. Around him, senior officers of 30th Corps gathered for the night briefing. Brigadier Vandeleur leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his uniform dusty, his voice calm but tight. "We're through Valkenswaard, but the road's a mess. Engineers are clearing mines and wrecks. If we push tonight, we'll lose more vehicles in the dark." Colonel Adair agreed. "Our right flank's exposed. No guarantee the Germans aren't regrouping nearby. We'll be asking men to fight blind." Horrocks listened without interrupting. He hated delays. The whole operation depended on speed, but pushing forward without full visibility, with tanks spread out and roads choked, risked the entire column grinding to a halt, or worse. He made the call. "We hold here tonight," he said, his voice final. "We move again at dawn, no later." There was no protest. The men were exhausted, and so was he. The first day of Market Garden had taken its toll, more than the briefings in England had suggested. The German resistance wasn't broken. Not yet. Later that evening, Horrocks walked alone through the edge of Valkenswaard. The town was quiet, lights dimmed. Dutch civilians moved carefully, watching the soldiers with cautious hope. Children peeked from behind doors. A woman handed out bread and cheese to passing infantrymen. The cemetery sat just behind the church where the chaplain had said. 4 fresh graves, 4 crosses, no names. Someone, perhaps a villager, had placed 4 lanterns beside them, glowing softly in the night. Horrocks stood there in silence. He didn't know their names, but he knew what they'd done. They'd driven straight into the teeth of the enemy, for no other reason than they were told it had to be done. And it had. The whole operation rested on men like them, unseen, uncelebrated, but irreplaceable. He took out a small notebook and scribbled a line beneath the day's notes. 4 unknowns buried at Valkenswaard, advance delayed, but spirit intact. The next morning would bring Eindhoven, then Nijmegen, then, if the gods of war allowed, Arnhem. But tonight, on the southern edge of Hell's Highway, the men of 30th Corps rested, knowing full well that this road would demand more, much more. Horrocks turned back toward headquarters, the sound of distant engines humming in the dark.
"I am lonely, dear. Life will never be the same. I only hope and pray we shall meet again."
My son, he died for England, forever in our thoughts. Sleep on, my dear son. He sleeps 'neath foreign skies, far from the ones he loved. In a hero's grave he lies. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Loved in life, treasured in death, a beautiful memory is all I have left.